Welcome to today's deep dive, where we'll be unpacking Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Oh, yeah.
The title might sound a bit negative, but trust me,
Yeah.
this book offers a refreshing and surprisingly insightful take on living a more meaningful life.
Right.
Ready to challenge some conventional wisdom about happiness and success?
I am all in.
Okay, let's jump right in with the title itself.
Okay.
It all starts with this intriguing story about the writer Charles Bukowski.
Yeah.
His tombstone inscription simply reads,
Wow.
"Don't try."
Really?
It's almost like he's telling us to embrace mediocrity,
Yeah.
which seems so contrary to everything we're told about striving for greatness.
Yeah.
How do you think that...
Well, I think it's fascinating
Yeah.
how Manson uses this as a jumping off point.
Okay.
Bukowski, known for his raw and gritty writing,
Hmm.
found success precisely because he wasn't trying to be anything other than himself. He embraced his flaws and experiences,
Yeah.
and that authenticity resonated with readers.
So in a world obsessed with self-improvement and projecting this image of perfection,
Right.
Manson's suggesting that maybe,
Yeah.
just maybe,
Mm-hmm.
embracing our imperfections is actually the path to authenticity and success. So like he's giving us permission to be human,
Yeah.
flaws and all.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt that pressure to be extraordinary, to constantly strive for more?
Absolutely. And it's often fueled by social media
Yeah.
and this constant bombardment of perfect lives and achievements.
Right?
It creates this feeling that we're always falling short.
Yeah.
Manson calls it the feedback loop from hell.
Oh, the feedback loop from hell.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds intense.
Right.
What exactly is that?
It's that vicious cycle of feeling bad about feeling bad.
Oh.
We worry about our anxieties,
Yeah.
get angry about our anger,
Right.
beat ourselves up for not being perfectly happy or successful.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
I think we've all been trapped in that loop at some point. It's like you're constantly fighting against your own emotions.
Right.
But how does not giving a feck help us break free from this cycle?
Mhm.
Does it mean we should just become apathetic and stop caring about anything?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's where Manson's message often gets misinterpreted.
Okay.
He's not advocating for indifference or apathy.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our energy and attention are limited resources.
Yeah.
We can't give a feck about everything.
Right.
So we need to be selective and choose our battles wisely.
So it's more about being intentional with our energy and focusing on what truly matters to us.
Yeah.
It's almost like decluttering our mental and emotional space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine someone stressing out about feeling anxious.
Right.
By acknowledging the anxiety and saying, okay, I feel anxious, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
We can actually reduce its power over us.
Okay.
It's about accepting what we can't control
Yeah.
and focusing on what we can.
That makes a lot of sense. But this next idea is really going to challenge some conventional thinking.
Okay.
Manson argues that happiness itself is a problem. Now, how can that be?
Right.
Isn't happiness what we're all striving for?
He's definitely challenging our assumptions here.
Okay.
Manson argues that this constant chase for happiness can actually be a source of unhappiness.
But isn't there a danger in becoming complacent if we're not always striving for something better?
Yeah.
Doesn't that lead to stagnation?
Manson isn't saying we shouldn't have goals or aspirations.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that true happiness isn't some destination we arrive at.
Right.
It's about finding contentment and meaning in the journey itself.
Mm-hmm.
He draws a parallel to Buddhist philosophy,
Okay.
which emphasizes accepting suffering as an inherent part of life.
Wait, so we're supposed to just accept suffering?
Yeah.
That seems a bit passive.
It's not about passive acceptance.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that suffering is a part of the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
Manson argues that suffering, both physical and emotional,
Right.
can be a valuable teacher.
Okay.
Think about physical pain like when you touch a hot stove.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That teaches you pretty quickly not to do that again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The pain serves a purpose.
Right.
It protects us from harm.
Yeah.
Manson argues that emotional pain serves a similar purpose.
So you're saying negative emotions like sadness or anxiety
Right.
can actually be signals that something needs to change in our lives.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to suppress or avoid those negative emotions,
Yeah.
we can learn to listen to them,
Right.
to understand what they're trying to tell us. For
Yeah.
example, feeling lonely might be a sign that we need to prioritize our social connections
Mm-hmm.
or find ways to feel more connected to something larger than ourselves.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing negative emotions as something to be feared or avoided,
Mm-hmm.
we can see them as opportunities for growth and self-awareness.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that leads us to one of Manson's key ideas.
Okay.
Choose your struggle.
Choose your struggle.
He argues that our struggles actually define our successes.
So we should be actively seeking out challenges and difficulties.
It's not about seeking out pain or hardship for its own sake.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that growth and fulfillment often come from overcoming obstacles and pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones.
Okay.
Manson uses a personal example of wanting to be a rock star.
Yeah.
It's a dream many people have.
Right.
But he realized he didn't actually enjoy the process of becoming a musician,
Uh-huh.
the practice,
Yeah.
the rehearsals,
Yeah.
the constant grind.
Yeah.
He was in love with the image of success, not the work required to achieve it.
That's so relatable.
Right.
I think we often focus on the end goal, the success, the achievement,
Yeah.
and forget about the journey itself. We want the reward without the effort.
And that's where we get tripped up.
Yeah.
Manson emphasizes that true fulfillment comes from finding meaning in the pursuit,
Yeah.
not just the destination.
Okay.
So the question he poses is,
Okay. What are you willing to struggle for? What are you passionate enough about to endure the inevitable challenges and setbacks?
that's a powerful question for all of us to consider.
Yeah.
What are the challenges we're willing to embrace in order to live a more meaningful life?
Right.
Okay, next up.
Okay.
Manson tackles this idea that you are not special.
You are not special.
Now, before you all get offended,
Oh, right.
he's not trying to be mean or diminish anyone's accomplishments.
Okay.
He's actually addressing what he sees as a dangerous trend in our culture,
Yeah.
the myth of exceptionalism. So he's talking about this idea that we're all destined for greatness,
Right.
that we're all special snowflakes.
Yeah.
But isn't there value in encouraging people to believe in their potential?
Absolutely. But Manson argues that this constant focus on being extraordinary,
All right.
fueled by social media and mass media,
Yeah.
can actually be harmful.
Okay.
It sets up unrealistic expectations and a sense of entitlement.
We're constantly bombarded with images and stories of exceptional people, which can make us feel inadequate and insecure.
It's like this pressure cooker of comparison.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to outdo each other with their achievements and curated lives. It's exhausting.
Right.
And when we inevitably fall short of those expectations, it can lead to disappointment, anxiety, and even a need to compensate.
Yeah.
So Manson's advocating for a more realistic and humble perspective on our place in the world.
Exactly.
Right.
He's not saying we shouldn't strive for excellence or have big dreams.
Right.
It's about recognizing that true fulfillment doesn't come from external validation
Okay.
or comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah.
He uses a fascinating historical example to illustrate this point.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever heard of Hiru Onoda?
Hiru Onoda.
Yeah.
I can't say that I have.
Oh, okay.
So fill me in.
He was a Japanese soldier who continued fighting World War II for nearly 30 years after it ended.
What? You're kidding.
He was stationed on a remote island in the Philippines
Okay.
and was completely cut off from information.
Right.
He refused to believe the war was over,
Wow.
even when presented with leaflets and letters from his family.
Wow, that's incredible.
Right.
It's like he was living in a completely different reality.
Onoda was so convinced of his mission,
Yeah.
his immortality project,
Oh,
as Ernest Becker would call it.
Immortality Project.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that term.
Yeah, so it's a concept from Ernest Becker's work on the denial of death.
Okay.
He argues that humans are driven by a fear of death,
Right.
and that this fear motivates us to create these immortality projects.
Yep.
Things that make us feel like our lives have meaning and purpose beyond our physical existence.
Okay.
Things like building a legacy,
Okay.
having children,
Right.
creating art,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
contributing to society.
Yeah, those are all things that would sort of like live on after we're gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while these can be positive and fulfilling pursuits,
Right.
Becker argues that they can also become problematic when we become too attached to them.
So you're saying our fear of death can actually distort our values and lead us down destructive paths.
It's a powerful idea to consider.
Yeah.
Manson uses Onoda's story to highlight the dangers of certainty.
Okay.
He was so certain of his mission,
Yeah.
his beliefs,
Right.
that he was blind to any information that contradicted his worldview.
It's like he was trapped in his own reality bubble.
Yeah.
But isn't there value in having some certainty in life? How do we balance the need for security with the need for open-mindedness?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something we'll explore further as we unpack Manson's ideas about the importance of uncertainty and
Okay.
questioning our own beliefs.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
I think we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
There's so much more to dive into.
Absolutely. We've got a lot more ground to cover.
Well, listeners, stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck. We'll be peeling back the layers of the self-awareness onion and exploring how Manson's ideas can help us live more meaningful and fulfilling lives.
Yeah, great stuff coming up. You know, it's interesting how Manson connects this idea of accepting death
Yeah.
to finding fulfillment in something larger than ourselves.
Okay. Yeah.
He suggests that when we confront our own mortality,
Mm-hmm.
it can free us from the pursuit of superficial goals
Right.
and help us focus on what truly matters.
That makes sense. It's like when you realize your time is limited,
Right.
you stop sweating the small stuff and start prioritizing what's really important to you.
Exactly. And he argues that entitlement robs us of this feeling of connection to something bigger.
Because it makes us so focused on our own needs and desires.
Precisely. It creates this inward pull, this sense that the world revolves around us.
Right.
And that we're somehow entitled to special treatment or constant happiness.
And that kind of mindset can lead to isolation and a feeling of meaninglessness.
Yeah. Because you're constantly focused on what you're lacking instead of appreciating what you have
Mm-hmm.
and how you can contribute to something larger than yourself.
Exactly. Manson argues that true happiness and fulfillment come from connecting with something beyond ourselves,
Okay.
whether it's a relationship, a cause, a community, or a spiritual belief.
So it's about shifting our focus outward from me to we
Right.
and finding a sense of purpose and belonging in something larger than ourselves.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we're all part of something interconnected and that our actions have ripple effects beyond our own immediate sphere.
That's a powerful idea.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we're not just isolated individuals,
Right.
but part of a larger web of relationships and shared experiences.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another important aspect of Manson's philosophy,
Okay.
the idea that our problems are unavoidable.
Wait, so we're just stuck with problems forever?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound very optimistic.
It's not about being pessimistic. It's about being realistic.
Manson challenges this idea that we can achieve a state of problem-free bliss.
Okay.
He argues that problems are an inherent part of life,
Yeah.
and that even when we solve one problem,
Right.
another one inevitably arises.
So it's like a never-ending cycle.
Yeah.
But how can we possibly find happiness and fulfillment if we're constantly battling problems?
Manson's point is that we shouldn't try to avoid problems altogether.
Okay.
Instead, we should focus on choosing better problems.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What does it mean to choose better problems?
It's about aligning our problems with our values.
Okay.
Remember the self-awareness onion we talked about earlier? Those layers of self-discovery?
Yeah, those layers of understanding our emotions,
Right.
questioning our beliefs,
Yeah.
examining our values.
Right. Once we have a clear understanding of our values,
Okay.
we can start choosing problems that are actually meaningful to us.
Right.
Problems that challenge us to grow and become better versions of ourselves.
So instead of stressing over things that don't truly matter,
Yeah.
we should focus on challenges that align with our passions and purpose.
Exactly. Manson uses a great analogy to illustrate this point.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about the difference between playing a video game on easy mode versus hard mode.
Okay, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
I'm more of an easy mode kind of gamer myself.
Okay.
But I see your point. When you play on easy mode,
Right.
you might win the game quickly,
Yeah.
but it's not as satisfying.
Right.
There's no challenge, no sense of accomplishment.
Exactly. The real thrill comes from overcoming obstacles and pushing ourselves to the limit.
Right.
And Manson argues that life is similar.
Okay.
When we choose easier problems,
Yeah.
we might avoid discomfort in the short term,
Right.
but we're ultimately robbing ourselves of the opportunity for growth and fulfillment.
So it's like we're trading long-term satisfaction for short-term comfort.
Yeah.
We're choosing the path of least resistance,
Right.
but it's not necessarily the path that leads to a richer and more meaningful life.
Precisely, Manson encourages us to embrace the challenges that come with pursuing our values.
Okay.
Even if it means experiencing some pain and discomfort along the way.
Hmm.
He argues that true growth and fulfillment come from pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones
Right.
and confronting those difficult but meaningful challenges.
So we've established that problems are unavoidable
Yeah.
and that we should focus on choosing better problems.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we actually go about solving them?
Okay.
Once we've identified those meaningful challenges,
Right.
what's the next step?
Manson emphasizes the importance of taking responsibility.
Ah, responsibility.
Yeah.
That seems to be a recurring theme in his book.
It is.
And it's definitely something that resonates with me.
Yeah.
It's so easy to fall into the trap of blaming others or circumstances for our problems.
It is a common trap.
Yeah.
But Manson argues that the first step to solving any problem is acknowledging our own role in creating it,
Right.
or allowing it to persist.
So it's about owning our choices and the consequences that follow,
Right.
even when it's uncomfortable.
Exactly. It's about shifting from a victim mentality to a more empowered perspective.
Right.
He makes an important distinction between fault and responsibility.
Okay.
Fault is about blame.
Okay.
It's about dwelling on the past and pointing fingers.
Right.
Responsibility, on the other hand, is about ownership.
Okay.
It's about focusing on what we can control in the present moment
Right.
and taking action to create a better future.
So it's about shifting our focus from who's to blame
Yeah.
to what can I do about it?
Precisely, and that shift in perspective can be incredibly empowering.
Right.
Manson shares a personal story about a painful breakup he went through.
Oh, breakups.
Right.
We've all been there. They can be incredibly tough to navigate.
Right. And Manson admits that he initially blamed his ex-girlfriend for his misery.
I think a lot of us have been there.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the blame game, especially when you're hurting.
But he realized that this blame was keeping him stuck in a cycle of pain and resentment.
Okay.
It wasn't until he took responsibility for his own happiness that he was able to move on and heal.
So it's about recognizing that even when someone else hurts us,
Yeah.
we're ultimately responsible for how we choose to respond and move forward.
Exactly. And by taking responsibility, we empower ourselves to create a better future,
Right.
regardless of the circumstances.
Okay.
It's about reclaiming our agency
Right.
and choosing to focus on what we can control
Yeah.
rather than dwelling on what we can't.
That's a powerful message.
Right.
It's a reminder that we always have a choice in how we respond to challenges.
Yeah.
And that even in the midst of difficult experiences, we can choose to focus on growth and healing.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that our power lies in our choices,
Okay.
not in our circumstances.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's so easy to feel like we're victims of our circumstances,
Right.
but we always have the power to choose our response and to focus on creating a more positive and fulfilling reality.
Absolutely. And this leads us to another powerful concept in Manson's book,
Okay.
the importance of uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound very appealing.
I know, right?
Most people crave certainty and security.
We tend to seek comfort in the familiar and predictable.
Yeah.
But Manson argues that clinging to certainty can actually be harmful.
Okay.
He even goes so far as to say that most of our beliefs are probably wrong.
Whoa, the bold statement.
Right.
But isn't there value in having strong convictions and beliefs?
Absolutely.
Doesn't that give us a sense of purpose and direction in life?
But Manson's point is that we need to be willing to question our beliefs
Okay.
and to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong. He argues that our brains are flawed and biased,
Okay.
and that we often cling to beliefs that make us feel good or safe,
Right.
even when they're not supported by evidence.
So you're saying we're all susceptible to confirmation bias, where we selectively seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs
Exactly.
and ignore information that challenges them.
Exactly. And this can lead us to make poor decisions
Okay.
and to miss out on opportunities for growth and learning.
So it's like we're surrounding ourselves with people who are just going to constantly agree with us
Right.
and tell us what we want to hear.
Yeah, and that's not helpful for growth.
Yeah, it can be very dangerous too.
Manson uses a fascinating example,
Okay.
the phenomenon of false memory syndrome.
False memory syndrome.
Yeah.
That sounds a little scary.
Right.
What is that?
It's when people have vivid and detailed memories of events that never actually happened.
Wait, how is that even possible?
Right.
Our memories are supposed to be a reliable record of our experiences.
It turns out our memories are much more malleable than we realize.
Yeah.
They can be influenced by suggestion, imagination,
Okay.
and even our own desires.
So we can literally convince ourselves that something happened,
Yeah.
even if it didn't.
Yeah.
But doesn't that make it incredibly difficult to distinguish between what's real and what's not?
It does make it challenging,
Yeah.
and it highlights the importance of critical thinking
Right.
and being willing to question our own perceptions and interpretations.
Okay.
Manson cites a case from the 1980s where a woman named Meredith Marin
Okay.
recovered memories of being sexually abused by her father.
That's horrifying if that were true, of course.
It was a deeply disturbing experience for her,
Mm-hmm.
but later she realized that these memories were false.
Oh, wow.
She had been influenced by therapy and her own personal struggles,
Right.
which led her to create a narrative that wasn't true.
Wow, that's a powerful example of how our beliefs can shape our reality,
Yeah.
even when they're not based in fact.
Right.
It makes you wonder how many other things we believe to be true that might not actually be true.
Exactly. It's a humbling reminder that our perceptions are limited
Right.
and that we don't always have the full picture.
Yeah.
Manson uses the story to highlight the dangers of certainty. When we become too attached to our beliefs,
Yeah.
we can become blind to alternative perspectives
Right.
and even evidence that contradicts our views.
So it's like we're putting on these blinders that prevent us from seeing the full picture.
Right.
But how do we become less certain? How do we open ourselves up to different perspectives without getting lost in a sea of doubt?
Manson suggests asking ourselves a simple but powerful question.
Okay.
What if I'm wrong?
What if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
That's a great question to ask.
Right.
It forces us to step outside of our comfort zone
Yeah.
and to consider alternative possibilities.
Right.
But isn't there a danger in questioning everything? Doesn't that lead to paralysis and indecision?
It's not about questioning everything to the point of paralysis. It's about cultivating a healthy skepticism and being open to new information.
Okay.
Manson uses the example of a friend
Okay.
whose brother is critical of her engagement.
Oh, family drama.
Right.
Always a good source of conflict.
Right. The brother keeps telling his sister she's making a mistake,
Okay.
but he won't explain why.
Mm-hmm.
He's so certain that he's right,
Yeah.
that he can't even consider the possibility that he might be wrong.
So he's trapped in his own bubble of judgment,
Yeah.
and that's preventing him from having a healthy and supportive relationship with his sister.
Exactly. Manson suggests that by asking himself,
All right.
what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
The brother could open himself up to a different perspective.
Right.
And perhaps even repair the relationship.
It's a reminder that humility and a willingness to question our own beliefs
Yeah.
are essential for personal growth and healthy relationships.
Absolutely.
It allows us to see the world through different lenses
Hmm.
and to connect with others in a more authentic and empathetic way.
Precisely. And this leads us to another key takeaway from Manson's book.
Okay.
The importance of action.
Okay. Action.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Right.
We've done a lot of thinking and analyzing so far.
Mm-hmm.
Time to put these ideas into practice.
Right.
But what about motivation?
Okay.
Don't we need to feel motivated before we can take action?
Manson actually argues that action is the key to motivation,
Okay.
not the other way around.
Wait, so you're saying we don't need to wait for motivation to strike before we take action?
Exactly. He calls this the do something principle.
Do something principle.
Yeah.
Okay. I like the sound of that.
Right.
Tell me more.
Manson found that when he was struggling to get his online business off the ground,
Okay.
he often felt paralyzed by anxiety and procrastination.
That's so relatable.
Yeah.
It's easy to get stuck in that cycle of overthinking and inaction,
Yeah.
especially when you're facing a new or challenging task.
Right. But then he remembered some advice from his high school math teacher.
Okay.
If you're stuck on a problem, don't just sit there and think about it.
Mhm.
Just start working on it.
Simple but powerful advice.
Right.
Sometimes the best way to get unstuck is to just start moving.
Exactly. Manson realized that the simple act of doing something, even if he didn't know exactly what he was doing,
Right.
would eventually lead to inspiration and motivation.
It's like we need to break out of the thinking trap
Yeah.
and just start moving.
Yeah,
Action creates momentum.
Right.
Momentum creates motivation.
precisely. He found that once he started taking action,
Okay.
even small steps,
Yeah.
it would create momentum and help him to overcome his fear and procrastination.
Yeah.
It's like that initial push can help to break the inertia
Mhm.
and get things rolling.
Yeah.
Once you start moving, it's easier to keep moving.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, a body in motion stays in motion.
Right.
But what if you take action and it doesn't lead to the desired outcome?
Okay.
What if you fail?
That's where it's crucial to remember that failure is not the opposite of success.
That's
It's
right.
part of the process.
Okay.
Manson encourages us to reframe our relationship with failure and to see it as a learning opportunity
Right.
rather than a sign of defeat.
So it's about embracing those inevitable setbacks and using them as fuel for growth and resilience.
Yeah.
But how do we distinguish between productive failures that lead to growth,
Right.
and those that keep us stuck in negative patterns?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another crucial concept.
Okay.
The importance of choosing the right metrics for success.
Okay, metrics. I'm
Uh,
sensing a theme here.
Right.
Manson seems to be big on measurement and evaluation.
He argues that the metrics we use to measure our lives
Okay.
can have a profound impact on our happiness and well-being.
Right.
If we're measuring our worth based on the wrong criteria,
Yeah.
we're setting ourselves up for disappointment and frustration.
So it's not just about setting goals, but also about choosing the right yardstick to measure our progress.
Exactly.
It's about defining success on our own terms,
Yeah.
rather than letting external factors dictate our sense of self-worth.
Exactly. He uses the example of Dave Mustaine,
No.
the former guitarist for Metallica who went on to form the band Megadeth.
Okay, a rock and roll example. I'm all ears.
Mustaine achieved incredible success with Megadeth,
Okay.
but he was still haunted by the fact that Metallica was more popular.
So he was measuring his success against an external standard,
Yeah.
his former band's popularity,
Right.
rather than focusing on his own achievements
Exactly.
and the impact he was making with his own music.
Exactly. And this led to feelings of inadequacy and resentment.
Right,
Even though he was objectively successful by most people's standards,
right.
he was trapped in a comparison game that he could never win.
It's like he was constantly looking over his shoulder
Yeah.
instead of focusing on his own path.
Right.
It's a reminder that comparison is the thief of joy.
Precisely. Manson argues that this is a recipe for unhappiness.
Okay.
He contrasts Mustaine's experience with that of Pete Best,
Okay.
the original drummer for the Beatles, who was replaced by Ringo Starr
Yeah.
just before the band became famous.
Oh, poor Pete Best. Talk about bad timing.
Right, but here's the interesting thing. Despite missing out on global fame, Best later said that he was happier
Why?
than he would have been with the Beatles.
Really?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Right.
It seems like he missed out on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
His values shifted.
Okay.
He found fulfillment in his family
Right.
and a more stable life.
Okay.
He was no longer measuring his worth against the success of the Beatles.
So he found a different metric for success,
Exactly.
one that aligned with his true values and priorities.
Exactly. And this allowed him to find peace and happiness.
Okay.
Even though he didn't achieve the same level of fame and fortune as his former bandmates.
It's a reminder that true success is not about external validation or comparing ourselves to others,
Yeah.
but rather about living a life that aligns with our own values
Exactly.
and brings us genuine fulfillment.
Precisely. And this brings us back to one of Manson's core messages.
Okay.
The importance of choosing the right things to give a fuck about.
Right.
It's about identifying those things that truly matter to us and investing our time and energy in those pursuits
Yeah.
rather than getting caught up in the endless cycle of comparison and external validation.
That's a powerful message. It's about defining our own values and
Yeah.
creating our own definition of success,
Yeah,
rather than letting the world dictate our priorities and our sense of self-worth.
absolutely. It's about taking ownership of our lives
Right.
and creating a reality that aligns with our deepest values and aspirations.
Okay, folks, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've talked about the importance of choosing better problems,
Right.
taking responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
embracing uncertainty,
Yeah.
the paradox of failure and success,
Right.
and the importance of choosing the right metrics for success.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still more to explore.
Yes. There's one final piece of the puzzle we need to discuss. The
Okay.
practical application of all these ideas.
Right.
How do we actually integrate Manson's philosophy into our daily lives
Mhm.
and create lasting positive change?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll delve into in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll explore how to identify our values,
Right.
how to take action even when we don't feel motivated,
Yeah.
and how to cultivate a mindset that embraces challenges and celebrates growth.
It's all about translating these powerful ideas into practical tools for living a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck, where we'll bring it all together and explore how to apply Manson's insights to create lasting positive change in our lives.
It's going to be good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Yeah.
We've explored some pretty profound ideas about happiness,
Right.
suffering,
Right.
failure,
Yeah.
and the importance of choosing our battles wisely.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about how to actually put these ideas into practice.
Okay.
Manson argues that it all comes down to values.
Right.
Remember those healthy and unhealthy values we discussed earlier?
Yeah.
the ones based on reality.
Yeah, right.
Social constructiveness, and things within our control.
Those are the good ones.
Yeah, the ones that lead to better problems and ultimately a more fulfilling life.
Right.
But how do we actually identify our values?
Yeah.
It seems like such an abstract concept.
It can be a bit tricky, but Manson offers some practical advice.
Okay.
He suggests reflecting on those moments in our lives when we felt truly alive, engaged, and fulfilled.
Right.
What were we doing?
Yeah.
Who were we with? What values were we embodying in those moments?
So it's about looking for patterns in our experiences.
Yeah.
Identifying those activities, relationships, and causes that bring us joy and a sense of purpose.
Exactly.
But what if those things don't align with what society tells us we should value?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Manson encourages us to question those societal expectations
Right.
and to define success on our own terms.
Okay.
He uses a great example of his own experience with social anxiety.
Social anxiety.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Right.
So easy to get caught up in worrying about what others think about you.
Exactly. And Manson realized that his fear of social situations was rooted in an unhealthy value.
Okay.
The need for approval from others.
Right.
His self-worth was dependent on external validation, which, as we've learned, is a recipe for unhappiness.
It's like you're giving away your power and letting other people dictate how you feel about yourself.
Right.
But how do you break free from that need for external validation?
Manson shifted his value from being liked by everyone to something more internal and controllable, being authentic and expressing himself honestly.
So he focused on being true to himself regardless of what others might think.
Yeah.
But isn't there a risk in being too honest? Couldn't that lead to conflict or hurt feelings?
There's always a risk in being vulnerable and expressing ourselves honestly.
Right.
But Manson argues that those risks are worth taking because they allow us to live more authentically and to build deeper, more meaningful connections.
Okay.
He found that by focusing on being true to himself, he was actually more likely to attract people who appreciated him for who he was.
Okay.
Flaws and all.
So he was still facing challenges.
Right.
But they were challenges that aligned with his values.
Exactly.
And ultimately helped him to grow and become more confident.
Right.
It's about choosing those better problems.
Yeah.
The ones that push us outside of our comfort zones, but ultimately lead to greater self-awareness and fulfillment.
Precisely. And that's a key takeaway from Manson's philosophy.
Yeah.
It's not about avoiding problems altogether,
Right.
but rather about choosing problems that are meaningful and that help us to become the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
It's about upgrading our problems.
Right.
Moving from those petty anxieties and insecurities to challenges that actually matter.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's like we're leveling up in the game of life, taking on more challenging quests that ultimately lead to greater rewards.
Right.
But how do we find the courage to face those challenges head on?
Okay.
Especially when fear and self-doubt creep in.
That's where action comes in.
Okay.
Remember the do something principle we talked about earlier?
Just start moving.
Yeah.
But it's easier said than done.
Right.
Especially when you're feeling overwhelmed or unsure of where to start.
Manson shares a story about how he used this principle to build his online business.
Okay.
When he first started working for himself, he was often overwhelmed by all the things he needed to learn and do.
That's understandable. Starting a business or any new venture can be incredibly daunting.
Right.
There are so many unknowns and potential pitfalls.
Exactly. And he found that the more he procrastinated, the more anxious and stressed he became.
It's like that cycle of avoidance just makes things worse.
Right.
You feel overwhelmed, so you procrastinate.
Yeah.
Which then leads to more overwhelm and anxiety.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So how did he break free from that pattern?
Yeah. How did he break free?
He decided to just start doing something.
Okay.
Anything, even if it was small or imperfect.
So instead of getting stuck in analysis paralysis,
right.
he just took that first step.
Yeah.
Even if he wasn't sure what the next step would be.
Yeah.
It's like trusting that the path will unfold as you go.
Exactly. And he found that once he started taking action, it created momentum and helped him to overcome his fear and procrastination. It's like that initial push can help to break the inertia and get things rolling.
Right.
Once you start moving, it's easier to keep moving.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, a body in motion stays in motion.
Right.
But what if you take action and it doesn't lead to the desired outcome?
Yeah.
What if you fail?
That's where it's crucial to remember that failure is not the opposite of success.
Okay.
It's part of the process.
Okay.
Manson encourages us to reframe our relationship with failure and to see it as a learning opportunity rather than a sign of defeat.
So it's about embracing those inevitable setbacks and using them as fuel for growth and resilience.
Right.
But how do we distinguish between productive failures that lead to growth and those that keep us stuck in negative patterns?
That's a great question, and it brings us to the importance of choosing the right metrics for success.
Okay.
Remember the examples of Dave Mustaine and Pete Best?
Yes, I do.
Mustaine was measuring his success against an external standard, his former band's popularity, which led to feelings of inadequacy and resentment.
Right.
Best, on the other hand, found fulfillment in his family and a more stable life, even though he didn't achieve the same level of fame and fortune as his former bandmates.
It's a powerful reminder that true success is not about external validation or comparing ourselves to others.
Right.
It's about living a life that aligns with our own values and brings us genuine fulfillment.
Exactly.
But how do we define those metrics for success?
How do we know if we're on the right track?
Manson emphasizes that we need to be mindful of the metrics we're using to measure our lives.
Okay.
He argues that we often fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to others or measuring our worth based on external factors like money, fame, or social status.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah, and as we've learned, that's a recipe for unhappiness.
Right.
It's like chasing a mirage, constantly striving for something that's always just out of reach.
Exactly.
Manson encourages us to choose metrics that align with our values and are within our control.
Okay, so things that we can actually impact.
Right. For example, instead of measuring your self-worth by the number of likes you get on social media, you can focus on the quality of your relationships, the progress you're making towards your personal goals, or the impact you're having on your community.
It's about shifting our focus from external validation to internal satisfaction.
From seeking approval from others to finding fulfillment in our own growth and contributions.
Precisely. And that's the essence of Manson's message.
Right.
It's not about achieving some elusive state of perfect happiness
Mm-hmm.
or becoming extraordinary in the eyes of the world.
Yeah.
It's about choosing what truly matters to us, embracing our imperfections, taking responsibility for our choices, and living a life that is meaningful and fulfilling on our own terms.
Wow, that's a powerful message.
It is.
It's a reminder that we have the power to define our own values, to choose our battles, and to create a life that aligns with our deepest aspirations.
Right.
Thank you so much for taking us on this deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck.
My pleasure.
It's definitely given us a lot to think about and apply to our own lives.
It has.
And to our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
And remember, the journey of self-discovery and personal growth is ongoing.
It is.
Keep questioning. Keep experimenting. Keep choosing those better problems.
Right.
And keep taking action.
Yes.
Even when it's messy and imperfect.
Absolutely.
And always remember Manson's words.
What are they?
Not giving a feck is a subtle art.
Yeah.
It's about caring about something more important than all the bullshit.
That's a good one.
What will you choose to give a feck about?
That is the question.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
See you later.